welcome back to my channel. My name is Summer, and it's just about Valentine's Day. See here. We had a group painting night at the library where I work, and there was an extra canvas. And so instead of just observing the patrons, I got to paint too. It was very fun. Valentine's. I love Valentine's Day. I love putting on pink and red clothes and wearing red lipstick. I love eating chocolate. I love watching rom-coms. I enjoy it. It's a fun holiday. And I just watched the movie Hard Eyes because I was hoping it would check the very specific box I look for when I'm single on Valentine's Day. And that box is labeled movies that are funny, definitely romantic, have a sweet love story so I can celebrate the spirit of the day, but the horrific circumstances surrounding the lovers makes me realize I'm okay with my relationship status if that means I don't have to deal with whatever those two crazy kids are dealing with. It's a really long label, and it messes up the layout of all of my checklists, but some notable classics that have checked off that box are movies like Warm Bodies, Lisa Frankenstein, Happy Death Day, and Happy Death Day to You. On the surface, Hard Eyes should have fit this bill. When you look the movie up online for showtimes, the genre is literally listed as horror/romance. And then there's the concept, a masked killer with glowing hard eyes hunts down couples. There's the tagline under the trailer, which is, "Stay single, stay safe." Then there's the fact that it was made by the same people who made Scream. It should have been fantastic. It should not have only checked that box, it should have gotten a gold star. But my gold star stickers stayed in the drawer where I keep them because I did not love it. It didn't check the box. Okay, well, if anything, on a technicality, there is a small mark in the box because, yes, it meets the requirements. But it is not added to the Valentine's Day watch list, and I'll tell you why. Also, I'm sorry, I am a little bit sick. You can hear that. I have tea that was supposed to be brewing, but I just turned on one of the burners and just let it heat the air and not the tea kettle. So if you hear that whistling, I'm going to get tea soon, and that will help me cough less, one hopes, because my water is propping up my art. Sacrifices must be made. Let me love you. Okay, so first, a brief overview of the plot since this movie literally just came out and I don't want to spoil the whole thing. Though I will say there are some light spoilers in this video, so proceed with caution. But Hard Eyes follows Ally, a marketing campaign manager for a jewelry company whose most recent ad campaign is bringing the company a lot of heat because the ad campaign that she pitched and supervised is about doomed romantic couples in history and fiction. Your Romeos and Juliets, your Bonnies and Clyde. And the ad is like a very classy black and white compilation of these historic and fictional couples all dying dramatically. Bonnie and Clyde getting shot a whole bunch of times and silk ribbons of blood are coming out of their chest. The problem is, this campaign dropped at the same time as a recent slew of murders made by the Hard Eyes Killer, a Valentine's-themed serial killer who's been on a spree for the past few years. He only kills on Valentine's Day, and he targets couples in love. So you can see why there's an issue. In order to fix the situation, a very handsome freelancer named Simmons is brought in, and Ally and Jay meet for dinner to discuss ideas on how to move forward with the project. Now, this is supposed to be a work dinner, but that work dinner is at a nice restaurant on Valentine's Day, and when the two of them are seen through the glowing rose-colored glasses built into the Hard Eyes Killer's mask, well, they are mistaken as a couple and they become the killer's new targets. So classic slasher paired with a little will they won't they between Jay and Ally, and that's basically the movie. There's a few reasons why the movie didn't work for me, and I think I will start with this. It was too gory. Now I hear you saying, Summer, you went to a rated R slasher movie. What did you expect? And I hear you. I understand the question. And maybe too gory is not the right term. Maybe I should say it was gratuitously gory. In the same way you can tell if a man's mustache is performative and not a reflection of his true nature, you can tell when a slasher is being gory for the sake of being gory and not for the sake of the story. Here's the thing. I like slashers for two very specific reasons. Reason number one, you can't fist fight a ghost. At least I can't. I can't fist fight a ghost, but I can fist fight a man. So I tend to stay away from things like your Insidiouses, chapters 1 through 3, your Annabelles, your Exorcists, because I don't want to mess with that. But a flesh and blood human, I could at least try to fight, so I'm not as scared by the end of a slasher as I am by the end of a of like one of these kind of movies. And reason number 2 is the final girl. I love the final girl. I love her moxie. I love that she makes it to the end. I love that she wins. I love that she starts off frightened and unsure, and by the end of the movie, she realizes her own strength and will to live. I watch slashers, so I can watch the final girl succeed. She's very inspirational to me. So when it comes to the actual slashing part of slashers, I cover my eyes. I am looking away. So I actually can't tell you how gory this movie was, or even if it was gratuitously gory. All I can tell you is that I spent a lot of time watching the movie like this, and when you watch the movie like this, you can see the corners of the screen, but you can't see what's actually happening here, and so you can kind of block the worst of it for yourself, but you can hear everything. So you know when it's kind of safe to take it away. And I know by the spans of time that I was doing this, that there was a lot going on that I wouldn't have wanted to see. Now, may I just say, if they made horror movies that had all of the suspense and action and tension of a classic R-rated horror movie, but it was like a fade to black you didn't actually have to see, perfect! That would be perfect for me. And I know I've probably ruined all of my horror movie fan street cred by saying this out loud. I just don't like that side of it. I like the story. And there are times when the story is so good, it makes up for the fact that I'm watching big chunks of the movie like this. So this movie had a lot of grody moments. And because it was trying to strike a balance between horror and romantic comedy, there was this sense that the kills themselves were being played for laughs. And that's the part that I didn't love. Now, this movie was made by the same people who made Scream. That was one of their selling points, and everybody wants to be Scream because Scream is a masterpiece, but nobody is Scream but Scream. I would say even the later Scream movies don't achieve the same mark that the original Scream did, because Scream 1996 at its core is not a movie about killing or about a killer. It is a movie about Sidney Prescott. I've done a deep dive into Scream already where I go into great depth on this subject, but at the heart of Scream is Sidney Prescott's journey through grief. You learn in little snippets of conversation and diegetic sound in the background about the tragic mystery of Sidney's mom's murder. You see how that event affects Sidney, how it separates her from her classmates in thought and in action. Sidney starts the movie in a place of uncertainty and fear because of what happened to her mother and the events going on around her, but by the end of the movie, she's no longer afraid because she knows the truth and she knows her own strength. Sidney's story in Scream is brilliantly told, and while there is the mystery of Ghostface and who's behind the mask, and there's the horror of what's happening in Woodsboro, all of those elements hang on the narrative thread that is Sidney's story, which makes the story stronger. It makes the narrative richer. It gives it depth and complexity. Scream is a satire on the genre of horror, but it's not a laugh-aloud comedy. It's clever and it's sharp, and the moments that are comedic are the bright notes, the moments of levity amidst the horror. But the actual mystery and suspense is taken seriously, and when someone dies in Scream, that death has weight. Hard Eyes lacks the foundation, character focus, and commitment to suspense and mystery that made Scream so strong. The story Hard Eyes tells is very bare bones, and by the end of the movie, we know the characters about as well as they know each other, which is to say not at all, because they meet Valentine's Day morning at a coffee shop, and the movie ends Valentine's night. And because we don't know these characters, we don't have a strong final girl to root for. And by final girl here, I mean final couple. And also by strong, I mean the character is well built and therefore a strong and sturdy part of the narrative. Not just like, oh, final girl's gotta be like strong, shoot 'em up fisticuffs kind of girl. No, I'm just saying she is a strong foundation or a pillar in the narrative. And we don't have that here. There is some attempts to lay some history and lore about the Hard Eyes killer at the beginning, but nothing really builds on that lore to make the mystery richer once the movie actually kicks off. And this is because genre-wise, I would say the movie doesn't take itself seriously enough. And I hear you again, Summer. Isn't it a comedy? It's not supposed to take itself too seriously. Why are you asking so much of the movie Hard Eyes? But you see, that is where you're mistaken. Hard Eyes isn't trying to be a goofy, over-the-top horror comedy like Scary Movie or something like that, where it is a parody of the genre. It's trying to be Scream. And what did I just say about Scream? I said the people who made Scream, and it was a satire, but it took itself seriously when it needed to. Hard Eyes is trying to be a horror RomCom, and that is a different kind of comedy than something like Scary Movie, where it's a parody or it's slapstick or it's over the top. My complaint with Hard Eyes is that it played both of its genres, both horror and romantic comedy, as jokes, and it committed to neither one. From the jump, it had this very over-the-top romantic proposal scene, all pinks and roses, the girl had red hair, and it had its funny elements that could have worked, but the tone of that scene set the tone for all of the romantic scenes going forward as insincere, because the tone was... Oh, my tea is ready. The tone of that scene set the tone for all of the romantic scenes going forward as insincere. The romance aspects themselves were the joke. The fact that there was romance in a horror movie at all is the funny thing that's happening. It's tongue-in-cheek, how sappy can we make this, and it's very much poking fun at the rom-com genre. And because the rom-com of it all was a joke wholesale, that half of the movie didn't really land. For example, Hard Eyes has this whole trying on clothes montage where Ally is trying to find a perfect outfit for her not date work dinner with the most handsome man she's ever met, okay? It should have been funny and charming, a little silly but sweet, because that's what it would be in a rom-com. Think of the bridesmaid's dress montage from 27 Dresses. In 27 Dresses, the montage serves as a way for us to get to know the character of Jane a little bit better through the weddings she's participated in and her reactions to them, and it serves as a way to bond the two romantic leads. In Hard Eyes, like I said, the point of this montage is for Ally to find an outfit to this not date work dinner with the most handsome man she's ever met, and that's it. That's the whole point. In the scene, Ally is shopping with her best friend, but her best friend's character has already been established in the film as caring and loyal. We learn nothing new about the friend, we learn nothing new about Ally, the bond between the characters doesn't grow any deeper, the choice of outfit doesn't go on to impact Ally positively or negatively later in the film. In fact, aside from one small detail that I will bring up later, the montage has absolutely no bearing on the plot and could have been removed entirely. Now, one thing I will maintain is that a good montage is a load-bearing montage that the movie would crumble without. 27 Dresses needs that montage for us to believe the characters fell in love. This here, the fun little not date night tryout on session, this is not a load-bearing montage. It was a montage added because someone, somewhere, putting together an idea board was like, well, what do rom-coms have? What do we put on here so we can call this horror movie a rom-com? And then somebody else in the room said, oh, a fashion montage. Those movies always have those. And the person said, yes, a fashion montage. The person said, yes, a fashion montage, and they wrote it on the list, and then it got added to the script because it was on the rom-com to-do list. And the thing is that fashion or makeover montages have been successfully used in horror movies before. This isn't an unprecedented thing. For example, there's a scene in Warm Bodies, both in the book and the movie, where they have a makeover montage. They're trying to make the zombie look human, and it's played for laughs, but it also serves the story because it bonds the two romantic leads. There's the intimacy of the closeness as she puts the makeup on, and we also get to see the zombie character R's outer image better reflect that inner narrator, which is an important moment for a character who struggles to hold on to his humanity while trapped inside his own shambling corpse. Here's another deep cut reference for you, 1984's Night of the Comet. Night of the Comet is a movie where a big comet flies over the earth and there's a bunch of watch parties and barbecues. Almost everyone in the world is outside to watch this thing fly over, and in a shocking twist, the comet turns everyone who's outside into dust, and the only people left on the planet are the few people who didn't watch the comet. Two of those survivors are a couple of teenage girls, and the first thing they do after freaking out and mourning for a bit is they go down into the empty city and they start raiding the department stores. There's a whole scene where they're trying on different outfits and making each other laugh, and it's an important moment for several reasons. One, because it is a brief moment of levity in the midst of the horror that makes the characters more real. We get a glimpse of who they are outside of these horrible circumstances. Two, it highlights how young and innocent and naive these two teens are, that even here, at the end of all things, they can still make each other laugh while they play dress up. And three, highlighting their youth and their immaturity makes it so much scarier when the girls realize that they aren't actually alone. So, sappy, fun montages have been used in horror with great success to further the plot and character development, and it could have been successful here, but Hard Eyes didn't commit to the bit. It gave us the bit, it gave us the montage, but it didn't commit to the montage. The montage was not load-bearing. It was smack in the middle of the calm before the storm portion of the movie, which is what I call the first 15 to 20 minutes of any horror movie, where we know bad things are going to happen, but nothing bad has happened to the main characters yet. So it didn't really serve as a moment of levity in the horror, and it doesn't shape or change any of our main characters or their relationships. It just sort of happens to happen, and you can feel that it's happening. Oh my god. That was a rough one. Oh. Maybe I'm the shambling corpse. It just sort of happens to happen, and you can feel that it's happening just to happen, and because of that, the moment doesn't land. It does not stick the landing. Now, that was one very in-depth example of why the rom-com side of things didn't work, but it highlights my main issue, not committing to the bit. If you're gonna make a horror rom-com, both sides of that coin better be mint. Let's look at some rom-com heavy hitters, shall we? When Harry Met Sally, 2 weeks notice, 27 dresses. And then let's look at some of those horror counterparts I mentioned earlier. Warm Bodies, Lisa Frankenstein, Happy Death Day. What's the main similarity that they all share that Hard Eyes does not? Those movies actually give their characters time to fall in love. Hard Eyes ends with two characters who like each other. And you know what? For what it is, that's fine and it makes sense, because these are two characters who don't know each other at all outside of one very stressful day. You look at a movie like When Harry Met Sally, where you've got two characters who don't really click the first time they meet, but as the years pass and they keep bumping into each other, they become very close friends and then they fall in love. Harry and Sally had years, a full decade really. Jay and Ally, on the other hand, have about 14 hours, so they're at a distinct disadvantage. But then you look at a movie like Happy Death Day, where the character is stuck in a time loop, and she ends up getting help from this guy on campus. She falls for him after spending day after repeated day with him. But he also falls for her by the end of each day, even though the loop resets for him and he doesn't remember that they've lived this day before. When Harry Met Sally and Happy Death Day both work in conveying believable love stories despite having vastly different timetables for love to grow, because the narrative itself dedicates time to the romance. And this is not the case in Hard Eyes. What we, the viewer, need in order to believe that the two characters in front of us are falling in love is time and moments and space where we can see how the characters are similar, how they differ, how those differences complement each other, and see the two characters grow closer. In Hard Eyes, there's a couple of surface-level similarities tossed out. They have the same coffee order, both of them like Pokemon, but for most of the movie, they are either running, screaming for the other person to run, screaming about how the other person did or did not run, or, verbally sniping at each other. We, the viewers, get so little information about either character outside of their coffee order, their job, or the fact that neither one of them want to get murdered, that the few calm moments meant for bonding end up falling flat. Even the heavy hitter moment that comes in any rom-com where the two characters are finally vulnerable and open with each other, when we get to that moment in Hard Eyes, it just feels like we're finally getting a crumb of backstory about these two, rather than a true, deeply vulnerable moment between the two of them. And I will not spoil their one actual moment of bonding, so let's look instead at the doomed work dinner. So they've already had a meet cute, they're at the work dinner, and Jay keeps trying to turn this work dinner into a date. Meanwhile, Ally is trying to keep the work dinner professional, until finally she snaps and is outright rude to him in a way that made Jay on screen and me in the theater both go, Oh my gosh. In unison. We said it at the same time. It wasn't like fun, snappy banter that you're like, ooh, look at them. They're flirting and they kind of don't like each other, but I think they will later on. It was behavior that outside of a movie, I don't think you'd ever be able to bounce back from that with someone who was a virtual stranger. So there was no bonding in that scene at all. She does run after him and apologize, which sort of fixes things and they're able to try to bond again. But the actual moment where they start to bond is cut short by two circumstances that really just swipes the leg out from underneath any bonding that was about to happen. These circumstances are, one, timing, the actual moment where it's calm and they aren't sniping at each other and they are being kind enough to each other to bond, is cut short by the Hard Eyes Killer's first attack on them. So that's the first circumstance that sort of robs the moment of bonding potential. And two, the other circumstance that sort of ruined the bonding is actually the only reason that they were able to have a moment to bond at all. And it's the only reason that the montage has any bearing to the plot. And the way it worked was so convoluted that it completely took me out of the story. Okay, so here's the scene. After she apologizes him, they share an Uber back to their respective apartments. Ally gets to hers first, she says goodbye, she gets out, only to realize that she doesn't have her keys because she, and I quote, probably left them at a store, meaning she lost them during the montage. Jay has also gotten out at this point. He asks what he can do to help. She says, oh, nothing, don't worry about it. And the door that they are standing in front of is a set of old-fashioned glass doors that lead into an apartment building. Have I set the scene for you? Are we all there with them? Perfect, let's move on. So, Ally's solution is to break one of the glass panels on the door so that she can reach in, unlock the front door, and then head upstairs and use her spare key to get into her apartment. Her exact reasoning that she says out loud is, oh, well, I'll just break the glass. It's okay, the landlord loves me. And instead of offering any alternatives to that wacky solution, Jay very gallantly offers to break the glass for her and gets a bunch of glass in his hand for his trouble. And their bonding moment is her helping him get the glass out of his knuckles. Now, this is sort of a running joke by this point in the movie. Their meet cute was her accidentally bumping his head like 7 different times, so she's made him bleed like 3 or 4 times at this point, and that is sort of a running joke. So, yeah, good, credit where credit's due, that was funny. But I must stress that at this moment in the story, neither one of them are in danger. They aren't running from anybody. They aren't scared. The Hard Eyes Killer has not attacked them yet. And so this means her first solution to a mild inconvenience is to break the glass of the communal front door that secures the entire apartment building. And it's okay for her to do that because her landlord loves her. I'm sorry, that's insane. It's an apartment building. I don't care how much your landlord loves you. In what world is breaking the glass of the front door that keeps everybody in the building safe a better option than, I don't know, knocking on the door, calling the landlord who loves you so much, calling a locksmith, calling the store where you left your keys, calling your friend who has a spare key for you, or using the call box to call another tenant because this is a city apartment and you know it has a call box. No, instead, the only option is to break the front door and compromise the security of the main character's home. That leap of logic took me so out of the moment that I couldn't even enjoy the romance or the comedy of their bonding over his wounded hand. But also, in retrospect, having the broken glass and easy access into the building could and should have been used for suspense as relates to the Hard Eyes Killer, but it was not used. And because it wasn't used, it negated even the faintest threads of purpose that the montage might have had. And this finally brings me to the horror side of things. The weakest aspect of the rom-com side of this movie was that it didn't take itself seriously enough to tell a good romance, for the simple reason that this movie was actually a slasher, so why should they bother? The weakest aspect of the horror side is that it didn't take itself seriously enough to tell a good horror story because it's actually a joke on rom-coms, so why should they bother? The kills and the gore felt gratuitous because they were being played as part of the joke, which takes away from the story and it takes away from the suspense, because the horrible part of horror, the thing that is frightening, is the fact that it is life and death, that the actions taken by the killer end a human life forever. The stakes are very, very high, and that's what makes it scary. The success of a concept like Hard Eyes lies in its sincerity. The jokes can and should be a part of it. It's a Valentine's Day horror rom-com. The comedy is part of it. But it needs, and say it with me now, to commit to the bit. The rom-com better be full-on rom-com, and the slasher better be full-on slasher. Let's look at some other horror classics with masked killers. Halloween, Friday the 13th, Scream, Happy Death Day. The mystery intrinsic to this genre of masked villain is the question of who and why. In Halloween, which is the most straightforward of the lot, the who, Michael Myers, is given straight away, but the why, basically that he's evil, is something the franchise keeps rebooting itself over. In Friday the 13th, the original doesn't have a hockey mask wearing Jason as the killer, but it does take until the end of the movie for the killer to be revealed, and the why is revenge. Scream, the who literally changes every movie, as does the why, but it does always somehow tie to pop culture. And in Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You, movie 1 gives you the who and the why by the end of the film, while movie 2 turns that reveal on its head and ends up giving you a why for the time loop itself. And you know what? The more I talk about Happy Death Day, the more I really just like that franchise. Anyway, the point I'm making with all of these is that the main pursuit of the characters in these movies, outside of surviving, is to unearth clues so either they themselves or at least the viewer can put together the who and the why. We learn a lot about Michael Myers from Dr. Loomis, even if Laurie Strode doesn't really know what's going on outside of trying to protect the kids she's babysitting. But in Scream and in Happy Death Day, figuring out the who and why is what stops the killing. And how do we, the audience, put together these things? Well, through little clues in the background, through dialogue, through setup earlier in the script, and follow through later in the script. And Hard Eyes, well, Hard Eyes did a lot of setup throughout the beginning portion of the movie, and then it did just about zero follow through. Take, for example, breaking the glass so the front door is easier to open. We already know from a shot of the main characters as seen through Hard Eyes, that they are his next victims. They think they're safe because they're both single, but we know from that shot outside of the restaurant that they are being followed, and that means we also know the danger of them leaving the front door compromised. Please allow me to read you a very long quote from Alfred Hitchcock. There is a distinct difference between suspense and surprise, and yet many pictures continually confuse the two. I'll explain what I mean. We are now having a very innocent little chat. Let's suppose that there is a bomb underneath this table between us. Nothing happens, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's an explosion. The public is surprised, but prior to this surprise, it is seen an absolutely ordinary scene of no special consequence. Now, let us take a suspense situation. The bomb is underneath the table, and the public knows it, probably because they have seen the anarchist place it there. The public is aware that the bomb is going to explode at 1 o'clock, and there is a clock in the decor. The public can see that it is 1:45. In these conditions, the same innocuous conversation becomes fascinating because the public is participating in the scene. The audience is longing to warn the characters on the screen, you shouldn't be talking about such trivial matters. There is a bomb beneath you and it is about to explode. In the first case, we have given the public 15 seconds of surprise at the moment of the explosion. In the second, we have provided them with 15 minutes of suspense. The conclusion is that whenever possible, the public must be informed, except when the surprise is a twist. That is, when the unexpected thing is, in itself, the highlight of the story. Alfred Hitchcock. And therein lies my issue with the horror side of Hard Eyes. They rely so often on the surprise of the killer popping up unexpectedly, the shock of the violence, the twist of the reveal, that they underutilized almost all of their moments for suspense. Let's circle back to that glass door again because we're never going to leave this apartment lobby. This is where we live now. In this moment, we have been gently set up for suspense. We know that they're the target, but that was all the way back at the restaurant. Since then, we've had a scene of them together in the car and a scene of them standing outside her front door. We are, at this point, very removed from our last establishing shot of Hard Eyes. One would assume, to utilize the element of suspense, to build on what was set up, that we would always have some sort of clue as to the Hard Eyes Killer's proximity to Jay and Ally. We would get maybe a shot of a car following the Uber, or a shot of Ally and Jay laughing about the broken glass, but the shot is taken from across the street and over the shoulder of the killer. Or a car pulling up and parking outside the building as we watch them walk up, and it's like those 7 driving scenes in Halloween where Michael Myers is just openly driving in his mask throughout the town.
I present yet again my eternal question. Who taught that man how to drive? What attendant in the insane asylum that man was raised in? He went in at like 6 years old because he had already lost his little marbles. His tiny little brain was cuckoo off the rack. It was bananas Foster, bonkers from the get-go. It just was gone already. If you've watched Halloween, you know Dr. Loomis is like, I've never seen such evil inside a child's eyes. There was nothing back there but evil. It was just evil inside that little boy. Like, that's basically what he said, right? So who said, let's take evil incarnate and get him a driver's license? Like, I'm sure he's not licensed to drive, okay? Nobody took him to the DMV, but who on this planet, in that universe, in that movie, was like, but we could teach him?
Or you could get the door swinging shut behind them but bouncing back open because it didn't quite latch. Or if you didn't want to do any of that, you could have them up in the apartment having their bonding moment, but then cut back to the hole in the glass so we can see a leather-gloved hand reach through and grab the handle. But nope. If you thought any of those things would happen, you would be wrong. The compromised security of the main character's home is never utilized. In fact, you have no idea where the Hard Eyes Killer is until he pops up behind the door of an inner room and attacks them. And once you finish the movie and you think back on that, the timeline of events, the layout of her apartment, the explanation from the killer at the end, it makes it pretty much impossible for the Hard Eyes Killer to be in that spot, in that moment. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And it's frustrating because they had such a perfect setup right there, right with that broken front door that they did not utilize. They opted for surprise over suspense because to choose suspense would be to commit to the bit, and they refused to do so. And there were so many little things like the broken glass that might have been utilized to flesh out the story and build up that mystery and build up that suspense. I don't know if these little details were intentional red herrings or if they were just kind of like jokes that ended up being red herrings for me personally. But one little detail I clocked that was never utilized is the fact that Ally's ex-boyfriend, and it's established that Ally is the one who ended the relationship. And if they'd wanted this little bird to flutter by and distract us, that could have been potential motive. Anyway, Ally's ex-boyfriend that she broke up with, in his Instagram profile picture, he's wearing a filter that has heart eyes. Let me reiterate again. His profile picture that we see several times is his face with one of those filters, and the filter gives him heart eyes. Now tell me why on earth you would put a detail like that in a movie like this if you weren't even going to bother to make us think the boyfriend might have done it. And I'm sorry, I know this seems like a spoiler, the fact that I'm waving around a giant flag saying the boyfriend didn't do it, but the only reason I feel comfortable doing that is because the possibility of the boyfriend being the Hard Eyes Killer is never even alluded to. Never, not even one time, not even once is it mentioned. It is just something that I came up with in my head because I was trying to be a good detective, and they put a hard eyes filter in a movie called Hard Eyes where the killer has hard eyes. So excuse me for trying to put together the clues you put in front of me. So frustrating. The makers of Hard Eyes had the opportunity to lay out a cool little suspenseful mystery for the viewer to unravel and a sweet little romance for the viewer to root for, but instead the focus was on the kills and the comedy of the concept itself rather than the comedy of the romance. The unmasking, the big reveal of who the Hard Eyes Killer was, and I'm not going to spoil that, was super lackluster. The who and the why felt very thrown together and almost wholly unsupported by the narrative. Like, looking back, there's two moments that I can think of off the top of my head that I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess that was foreshadowing, but it, like, the overall effect was just like, oh, that's who? And that's why? Gross. I'm all out of my tea. It wasn't a bad movie. It's just that it wasn't all that it could be. Some of the humor did land. It had some genuinely funny moments, and those moments were usually the really cheesy things that reminded you that you were watching a Valentine's-themed horror rom-com. For example, there's a moment toward the end of the film where Ally's talking to her best friend, and she confesses that she does like Jay. And then her friend's like, you have to go to the airport and stop him from getting on that plane, because of course Jay's going to the airport to get on that plane. What self-respecting rom-com wouldn't put that in there? So it's like, that was funny. And in that same conversation, the friend's responses eventually just devolves into her saying, like, other rom-com titles. Like, there's a moment where she says, it's some kind of wonderful, crazy, stupid love. And, like, that was really funny. Or the fact that the detectives or FBI agents that were pursuing the Hard Eyes killer, they were named Hobbs and Shaw, like Hobbs and Shaw from the Fast and Furious movies. And the lady detective who played Shaw, she was played by the same actress who was Dom's sister in the Fast and Furious movies. So that was funny. And it was in those moments, for good or for ill, that I felt like I was gently plucked out of the movie theater and deposited in a chair next to the screenwriter. And the two of us were typing the script together, and we'd laugh and we'd chuckle, and I'd say, yes, you do have to name the sheriff in this Valentine's-themed horror rom-com Sheriff Hartley. There is no other name that man can have. And those parts were funny. So yeah, it's just that I think this movie could have been so much more than it was if it had just committed to both of its bits. Its one crime is that it didn't go hard enough. It didn't go hard enough in the right direction, and it didn't understand its true purpose. Its true purpose was not to be a parody, and that's the level of comedy it was trying to achieve. It was trying to go the scary movie parody route with its jokes, making fun of slashers and making fun of rom-coms. But that is not what this story needed. What this story needed was dedication to the craft on both sides. Dedication to the craft of rom-coms and dedication to the craft of slashers. If it had sincerely tried to make a rom-com and sincerely tried to make a horror movie, I think we could have had something really unique and funny and special. That it can be done, I have no doubt. My Lonely Valentine's Days have featured many a film that achieved that exact goal. But Hard Eyes, it didn't believe in itself. And because it didn't believe in itself, it could not fly. So farewell, little broken bird, and happy Valentine's Day. But you're not on my roster. You do not make it on my Valentine's playlist. Anyway, yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the movie Hard Eyes. What did you think? Did you like the movie? Have you seen the movie? Have you even heard of the movie? Because I feel like everybody I've mentioned Hard Eyes to has been like, what's Hard Eyes? And I'm like, are you guys not getting the trailers that I'm getting? Is my algorithm just for me? The way that it's supposed to be tailored? Anyway, or do you have any other movies that fit the horror rom-com genre? Because Valentine's Day is coming up and I need a new movie to watch. Otherwise, I might just go classic rom-com and watch the 1992 Sandra Bullock vehicle, Love Potion number 9. That's what's on my docket currently, but I could be persuaded to watch a different style of movie. Let me know. Bye! Oh my gosh, they're afraid. They wouldn't commit to the bit because they're afraid of commitment. It's a metaphor. They wouldn't commit to the bit because they were afraid of commitment. Oh. He's wearing a filter that has hard eyes.